Paris, Blockchain Week. Welcome, Charles Hoskinson.
It's good to be here. How you been, Brock?
I'm always grateful. Fresh off a plane yesterday from New York City, lovely dinner with Mayor Eric Adams, and then straight to the airport, and glad to be here. I love Paris.
So I have a story about Mayor Eric Adams. I love that guy. So I was in New York for Henry Kissinger's birthday party. This is shortly before he died, and Eric Adams showed up, and I had this guy that was augmenting our detail named Mike. We call him Big Mike, because he's this big New York police officer, and everybody had to go through metal detectors to actually get in, but Mike snuck us in through the back door, so we shaved off like 30 minutes. But the best part of that is Biden was in town at the time, and all the roads were closed off, but Mike's a police officer, right? So we were going on the sidewalks, doing counterflow and all these things. He's flipping off cops, and we're just like, this is what I've always dreamed of being able to do in New York City. So anytime I think about Eric Adams, I always think about Mike, and I think about that day of us quickly getting through Manhattan. But he's a great speaker.
He is, and we're going to have to get you...
Right? Is that better?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that.
And I'd love to get you back together with the mayor. Most people don't know the mayor of New York City. At his victory speech from the primaries was talking about New York City, Bitcoin, and how important it is that New York City is not just the financial capital of the 20th century, but the 21st century. And his first action as mayor-elect was to announce that he would be taking his first 3 paychecks in Bitcoin. So he's not a newcomer.
All right, Team Orange, how about that?
Yeah, we've orange pilled him.
Hell yeah. All right, so geopolitics.
Good starting point, right?
Yeah, right. We got a trade war. What the hell's going on with that?
Well, trade war. Well, first of all, if you study Trump's style, right? Trump is a businessman. He's transactional. You know, he knows how to make deals, and he's a strong, businessman. He's aggressive. He's bold. And so my view, and I can't speak from a place of knowing, I'm not on the inside of this, is just kind of set the table by putting a blanket sort of tariff change, which, by the way, the Democrats for 20 years have talked about doing, just never did it. You can go back and study history. The Democrats repeatedly said that we needed to impose these tariffs, but now that Trump has done it, they're obviously all very opposed. But I think what it is it's going to force everyone to the table, and I think you're going to see deals done with the biggest companies in the world and countries one by one. I don't think this is going to last. I think that, Trump just wants to see fair deals, and I think that America hasn't had a fair deal. I don't think that there's been great logic. The only thing I would hope that they do is, from a foreign policy perspective, it's not purely transactional, but how do we create alliances? How do we create special relationships with countries that we think are strategic? So it's not just how do we create fair trade policy, but how do we also strengthen relations by creating better trading relations with countries that are important to us?
Yeah, it's an interesting take. It's clear that globalization has worked for some people, but it obviously hasn't worked for a lot of people in the world. And what's happened is that, we grew up kind of in a rules-based international order. We were really the post-Soviets. We were kids when the Union was just starting to collapse. But our fathers, our grandfathers, our people that came from before, they lived under a great powers conflict, which meant that you had big empires, and those empires were really powerful. And so while you have treaties and alliances and contracts, if at any time those get in the way of what a big country wants, they're just going to take it. And so what's happening is we're starting to move back from a rules-based international order to great powers conflict between China and Russia and the United States. And you see this with proxy conflicts like Ukraine or what's going on in the Middle East or potentially Taiwan soon. So in that setting, what's interesting is that where do you get as a global businessman stability? Because at the end of the day, if you can't rely upon the legal structure, the contract, or any of these things, your only option is blockchain. So when people say, will these tariffs destroy crypto or not, one of my thoughts has been, well, no, it's going to drive a tremendous amount of money into the cryptocurrency space because this is the only way you can have a truly global customer base. because you don't know. You could wake up tomorrow and suddenly one country is no longer friends with the U.S. or another country is no longer friends with China. And if you're in one sphere or the other sphere, you can't do business with them anymore. You see Switzerland with the Russians. When I was growing up, you could walk through Switzerland, and the Russians would have these beautiful chalets. They'd have private bankers. They were very welcoming of the oil money. And then after the Ukrainian conflict, what did the Russians? They got kicked out, and they had to move to Dubai and other places. And that was very jarring because they had roots, some cases, 30 years inside Switzerland. Switzerland was supposed to be neutral. So I think that's going to have a huge impact on the market as a whole. What do you think about crypto and the great powers conflict?
Well, I'd say it's April 9th. I think that March 7th was the second most important day in crypto's history, second only to January 3rd, 2009. Obviously, the day that Bitcoin launched. And so we have a crypto president of the United States of America that hosted a summit following up on his promises on the campaign to create a Bitcoin strategic reserve. I was just with the president of Ghana. I meet with world leaders all the time, and the conversation is very different. I would have conversations with leaders, and they'd say, well, we want to see what the United States does, because no one wanted to be on the wrong side of it. My current conversations are, I want to give you an update. The world has changed for crypto on March 7th. The United States of America has a Bitcoin strategic reserve. The United States of America is accumulating Bitcoin and holding it on its balance sheet in a crypto equivalent of Fort Knox. The U.S. has now told the banking industry to bank us after we used to be debanked. Just yesterday, the crypto task force of the Department of Justice was shut down and reassigned to terrorism. We are seeing major changes. The U.S. has now set the stage for dominoes to fall the world over. I think this is an extraordinary event in terms of what's happening. I couldn't be more excited for our future. We are no longer a large fringe group. We are sought after as entrepreneurs, desired in many countries in the world, and not just, Caribbean islands and, where we generally used to have to do business. But we're being sought and fought after, recognizing the value we bring in economic development, innovation and change, jobs, value. We're impacting elections. So I couldn't be more excited. I think we're going to watch over the next year or two mass adoption and being welcomed with open arms, where we're going to be able to integrate into the financial infrastructure. Being banked in this industry. How many people were debanked that worked in this business over the last, anybody that's been in this business a long time and you can do a ChatGPT, search of their role, likely was debanked. Those days are over. We have permission. And I don't mean we were permissionless systems, but that doesn't mean our systems of governance or governments were giving us permission. We had to go to bed every night worried that, we might have some investigation that starts tomorrow. For all you know, you might, your door might get knocked in and be handcuffed. We can sleep at ease thanks to these changes. And now we can build with confidence. We can be bold and understand we have the opportunity, as we always knew, but now it's very real. We have an opportunity to change the world, to build a better world, a more trustworthy world, and one where trade and all these things, I couldn't be more excited. What a moment it is, to be here, to be now, and to be pioneers, and to everybody that, was a victim of lawfare, everybody that had to endure this, congratulations to the pioneers that had the perseverance to build, knowing there were great risks being taken to get us here and now.
Yeah, Brock is not exaggerating. He's not exaggerating. So I'll give you some examples, one personal and a few others. So first off, I had over $300 million in one bank account, a long-term banking relationship with this bank account. And they shut me down. Wasn't under an investigation, wasn't sued, no IRS audit, no nothing. And I had an investment relation with a related entity. The bank CEO of that company called the compliance desk and said, "Why in God's name are you shutting this guy's account down?" And they wouldn't even give me an answer. You just have 2 weeks to move your money. This is how fucked up it was. Every single exchange in the United States that traded crypto was sued. Every single one. You had this Kafkaesque policy where Coinbase was allowed to do an IPO. They filed an S1. They told the SEC their entire business model. They said, oh, this is how we're going to do everything. They said, great, go expose millions of retail investors to your business model. Then they said, well, we need to talk to you, though. So they spent over 20 times, they came in to talk to the SEC, said, we got broker-dealers licenses. Tell us what you would like to do. We're going to come in and register. Scary Gary, he kept saying, come in and register. So they tried. SEC ghosted them and then sued them. And when you read the lawsuit, it's as if they've never had a conversation. It's like they just came in off the street side. It's like, who the hell are these Coinbase guys? This is what we dealt with for the last 4 years. And there was no one in the media who really stood up for us. And Trump, when he campaigned, he said he'd take care of us. And so far, Ross Ulbricht has been pardoned. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, and then we got the crypto czar. We got the White House talking about it. You got bicameral working group. We're going to have a stablecoin bill in 60 to 90 days pass, a market structure bill probably passed by August to September. That's massive progress. And to Brock's point, it's changed the international dialogue. I was just down in Argentina, $700 billion GDP, $100 billion in cryptocurrencies there. 1 out of every $7 in their country is crypto now. How about that? Vietnam, 32%. Of the people of Vietnam hold crypto. Nigeria, about 25%. The whole world is turning crypto, as we speak. So now let's talk about where's the next $10 trillion going to come from? Real world assets and the merger of DeFi and TradFi. So how do we get there? What's the next generation of crypto look like?
Well, I think real world assets, security tokens, things of that nature, as we put more and more of our assets or in our trading activities on chain is clearly going to bring an immense amount of wealth. Certainly governments, now that the U.S. has Bitcoin on its balance sheet, there were other governments that had been doing this quietly, but I think that's going to encourage central banks and governments around the world to do similarly. Like, nobody likes to be left out. Now that the big step has been made directionally, you'll have some that move faster than others, but you've got government adoption. Certainly, everybody I know that even thought this is great, the same question, every wealthy person I know that didn't get in, the conversation was always the same. Yeah, looks great, it's wonderful, but the U.S. government might just shut it down. It couldn't exactly happen that way, but that was the fundamental reason why big family offices, large financial institutions sat on the sidelines. That argument's over. Meaning, everyone that looked at this, that was curious about it, and even saw opportunity, but just declined to act. All of those institutions and giant pools of wealth are looking at this. I mean, again, you can't understate the U.S. government's most recent move. This is global permission, and it's not just for us, it's for everyone. It means every government. It means every institution. I mean, that's what percentage of the world's wealth was participating. When we talk about these numbers, it's not like the biggest pools of capital had been participating. So, I mean, there's easily $7 trillion of wealth that could just come into, call it, the existing crypto markets on that last statement. Then as we look at these additional use cases, as more and more things go on chain, as the builders and creators continue to build Web3 applications that take us out of Web 2 and bring us into an environment where the users are incentivized with something more than just access, but some economic participation in the value of the platform. These are huge things. There's way beyond $7 trillion of potential growth here. And there's nothing holding us back other than you guys building the best products and services. And obviously we've got the whole AI component of it as well, gaming. I mean, it's Web3 again.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible. And, I think in terms of generations, I did a keynote this morning where I talked about the first generation, the second generation, and we're currently in the third generation. And we're almost done with the third generation. The third generation has been about scalability, interoperability, and governance. And there's a lot of great things like SWI and Aptos and Solana and Cardano and others that are fighting that war right now. And we're getting to a point where we actually have a handle on the blockchain trilemma. We're getting to a point where blockchains can talk to each other. And we're getting to a point where we understand what on-chain governance looks like. And as Brock is alluding to, there's this gigantic tidal wave of capital. And it's waiting to come into the cryptocurrency space. And one of the biggest hurdles was the regulatory walls. But as those come down, the last hurdle is how do you merge the private with the public? This is the biggest area. Because the thing is that real life business is always public and private together. You're running a McDonald's, the cash register, you don't tell people how much money is there. Your HR records, you don't tell them when Sally had a complaint. You have medical records. When you have securities or these types of things, there's always a private side, there's always a public side. So when people say, how do we put the DAOs on chain? When people say, how do I take $10 trillion worth of real estate and other things and put that on chain? The first question is, well, where does the private data go? How do we manage all of that? Who do we disclose to? What's the disclosure regime? How do you automate the regulation? So for the past 6 years, we've been building a technology called Midnight, which is launching this year. And what's nice is we have a lot of neighbors. So we thought we'd be the only ones in this space, and now we got Espresso and ZK Sync and Aleo, and we got Starkware and all these other players, which is really cool because you know you're barking up the right tree. What's so interesting is this is the market merger which gets rid of TradFi and it gets rid of DeFi. It just becomes Fi. You know, we just become finance. It's just like the 90s. We had newspapers and we had digital distribution, digital content. And we just got rid of newspapers, called the news now. And it's online, it's physical, it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous. So we're going to have one global market in 5 years to 10 years, which is self-sovereign, meaning that you own your own identity, you're in charge of the disclosure regime, it's liquid, meaning it runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, everywhere you look, everywhere you go, and assets can flow freely from one system to another system, from your bank to a cryptocurrency to your Microsoft Windows wallet, because that'll eventually come to your X wallet that's there, and you can transform it any way you want. This was the completion of the vision. And what's cool is that it carries your values as you go. So you get to decide what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, and nobody can steal your money. Nobody can take it because you're still your own bank. It's still decentralized. And in addition to that, you're in control of your own identity now. You own your own data. You get to decide where that data goes, how that data gets to be moved. And so it's so cool because I've been in this space 15 years. Brock's been in as long, and it's been a long road, and we never thought we'd get here. You know, it's been a long journey. You know, we were crazy people running around saying, oh, this crypto thing is going to work, and you know, maybe kind of sort of if we push it in the right direction, you know, Bitcoin will get to $5,000 or we'll get some adoption, these types of things. And suddenly, you know, you have the President of the United States tweeting about it. You have the Reserve, which is just extraordinary when you think about it. And every country is not saying, what is this crypto thing? They're saying, what is our crypto strategy? And they come up to you and they invite you and say, can you talk to us about our crypto strategy? And I know you travel all around the world and talk to so many different nations. Just Ghana, right?
Yeah, I was in the last week, New York, Ghana, Poland, Ukraine, Moldova, and I go from here to Serbia, Romania, Egypt, Spain, UAE, Dubai, right? But I served in the United Nations for Spain, Portugal, the Dominican Republic, and every country in Central and South America. I shifted my UN capacity to serving on behalf of the president of Palau because he just loves innovation, and they're a voting member. And I also serve as the chairman of the Nations Development Council of Lives Amplified. We're the largest organization of former heads of state after the UN, and so I'm just kind of afraid I may have to go spend the next year. Well, hopefully I can find enough interesting people that can deliver these messages other than me, because it's actually a lot of places to go. But I'm very excited. We've got relationships with 44 of the 54 African countries. Latin America's far along, but Africa's really the next frontier for where I think my work is. Unfortunately, it's far away and it's really big. And so I have to come up with some strategy that doesn't require me doing all of them myself. For anybody that is interested in, call it the GovFi, and getting this into government and making sure that governments are thinking about their regulation and their integration of systems. I mean, so many, when we think of reg tech, blockchain is actually an incredible technology to bring things, again, on chain. Government data belongs there probably as much as anything else. And so there's a lot to be done. You know, pick your passion, find the thing that you get most excited about and pursue that, because that's where your work feels like play. You know, the time just disappears in a good way. And so there's so much to be done from a government perspective, but I want to spend a minute, more than a minute, talking about, midnight. I was asking, about timeline. I'm like, is it dusk or is it a minute before midnight? It sounds like the time is about 11:11.
Yeah, we're about there.
And so, it's getting close to that. And so for everybody here in the room, I want to make sure, since this is where your time is being spent, and I don't need to walk through the background, but from BitShares to CEO of Ethereum to Cardano, now Midnight, and a list of other contributions to the industry, not worth mentioning because those are 4 pretty monster ones. I'd love for everybody here to understand where the opportunities are for Midnight. What are you looking for? What should people be thinking about? How can they get involved? How do they participate? How do they partner? Because this is, you would never want to bet against Charles. And so everybody wants to know where to place their bets.
Well, I appreciate that. So the magic of Midnight is I was rich enough that I didn't have to do an ICO or take any VC money. So I said, fuck the system, we're just going to give it away. So we're doing an airdrop here soon. It's called Glacier Drop. 37 million people can participate. 8 chains, from Bitcoin all the way down to BNB and everything in between, including Cardano and Ethereum and Solana. So if you have any of those tokens, congratulations, you already own it. So there you go. You get a little something. And then the other thing is that we already have 108 partnerships that we've made with Midnight, and we're not even trying that hard. We're still kind of in the testnet phase and finalizing these last components. And throughout the spring and summer, we're really going to scale that up. And right now, we've been very aggressively pursuing developers, because what Midnight really does is Midnight does private smart contracts. And this is very different than a normal SNARK system. A SNARK system, you pick one thing and you make proofs about that thing, whether it be like a Bitcoin transaction or the state of some smart contract. This is a programmable privacy system, meaning you can write private code for anything that you want. And we wanted to have a great developer experience for it, so we used TypeScript as the language, a variant of JavaScript. That's a pretty understandable language that everybody knows how to use and is comfortable with. And the other thing, you're dead in the water if you come in and say, move to my chain or buy my token. So we wanted to do something very different. We created this chain abstraction idea. So with chain abstraction, basically you can be in Ethereum or Solana or Cardano or Bitcoin or any of these systems, and you create a hybrid application. So you pay your transaction fees in that infrastructure. So when you write an app on Ethereum, you pay in Ether. When you write an app in Bitcoin, you pay in Bitcoin. You pay in ADA, you pay in Sol. So you use whatever currency you want to use. That's pretty good. And with AVS, we kind of invented that category with EigenLayer. We wrote this wonderful paper called Minotaur. We can have validators for multiple chains maintain the state of Midnight, which means you pay block rewards to multiple chains at the same time. So you have this idea of blockchain partnership. You bring people together. This is now an extension of people's infrastructure, cooperative equilibrium instead of a Nash equilibrium. Because, I'm just tired of the adversarial nature of the space. I'm tired of tokenomics purporting people to hate each other. You got to have people love each other now. You got to have people work with each other. Our big competitors are the Magnificent Seven. They're all going to come in once the stablecoin bill and the market structure bill gets passed. And we're going to be dealing with platforms that have already 3 billion customers, and they make the phones in your hands. You're going to be dealing with customers that make the operating system on your laptop. That's tough. Why in God's name are we at each other's throats in this industry and trying to say, is it Solana versus Avalanche versus Bitcoin versus Ethereum? We're small and they're big. The reason we got so far is we unified. And the point of Midnight is to try to create a situation where everyone has a benefit to keep this thing around. That's why we didn't take VC money. It's why we didn't do an ICO. It's why we didn't do yet another layer 1 or any of these things. We wanted to do something distinctly different. The other cool part of it is that no one has ever bundled a private smart contract system with a digital identity system. Because the thing is, you have to decide where disclosure goes. So you can be a superset of Monero and Zcash where it's just disclosure of you, or you can build into the dApp level any arbitrary disclosure regime. Because how many people here want to build a DAO? How many people here want to participate in a DAO? A DAO has a public side, but it has a private side as well. And what everybody always does is they sweep the private side into some centralized server somewhere, and they say, well, that'll be that thing. So let me get this straight. To use a cryptocurrency properly, you have to go through a middleman or a centralized gatekeeper. It's like having sex with your pants on. You're doing it wrong. Okay, so there's a problem here. You can't use centralized gatekeepers. You can't use middlemen. And so the magic of Midnight is it lets you do the private side and the public side for your DAOs, for stablecoins. Everybody's so enamored with stablecoins. They say it's the first true real-world asset, tokenized treasuries. Yeah. Do you feel comfortable that every single thing you've ever bought with a stablecoin is known and tracked? We call that the digital yuan. We call that a panopticon. We don't really want to live in a society where all that stuff is tracked. Well, guess what? That's what we're at with Tether and Circle right now. Now, it's just because of the limitations of the system. It's nothing against these companies. They're good companies. They're run by good people. But at the end of the day, if they're on a public ledger and they're transacting, that's known forever by design. So you need a privacy-preserving system so that you can do those stable coins, but still preserve the regulatory schemes they have, like freeze and seize and recall and these types of things. And it's the same for every other category. All the real-world use cases, the supply chains. When he goes and talks to Ghana and they say, hey, we need transportation infrastructure, or we need to have a better land registration system because we don't want people to steal that. Or you go to Congo and they say, we really want to get rid of the illegal mining in lithium. It's a huge problem. I was just down in Argentina, the same situation. You have all these illegal lithium mines that are there. Well, guess what? How do you track that? You need privacy inside these types of systems. So that's why we created Midnight, and that's why we created it in a collaborative way. And the first thing you can do is call to action, go to midnight.network. The testnet is already live. It's already running. It's a chimera. I on purpose, designed it with technology from different ecosystems. It was very hard for me because I'm a NIMBYism guy. Not my backyard. I have to invent it myself. So we used some stuff from Aptos and some stuff from Polkadot, and we used some stuff from Cardano, and we used some stuff from Zcash and these other ecosystems. And we brought it all together, but we have a running test net. And I want you to build some dApps. Actually build some stuff. Talk to the team. We have the team here. Iran is somewhere around here, and Maurizio is somewhere around here. And they can tell you what's already been built, whether it be in GameFi or NFTs, and they can tell you what needs to be built. And we're very interested whether you're a Fortune 500 institution, you're a game developer, you're just a solo person that's a dabbler and you want to know more about this, we want you guys here. If you're an AI, we want you guys here. If, I see the OODA guy right there. Yeah, OODA loops. Yeah, there you are. We want you guys here and to play around with it. So thanks for letting me give my little pitch.
Well, thank you for sharing it. Midnight.network.
You want to take some questions?
Yeah, let's open up some questions. We'll try and start with people in the front because it's just easier to get. We can hear you. Anybody have any questions for Charles or I?
Oh, here, let me give you the mic.
Let's get a mic.
There we go.
Super simple one, but if somebody wanted to know, like, why and how they can use Midnight, how would you summarize that in one line?
Why and how?
Why?
If you're a retail user, it should just be built into your wallet and you're interacting with a Midnight-enabled dApp. If you're a developer, you go to midnight.network, read the documentation, we'll show you how to write an application.
Rock and roll.
Did you say Brock and roll?
Someone take the mic away.
Keep them coming. You got Brock Pierce here, guys.
Well, you got both of us. There's not much ground we can't cover.
Hey guys, love the topic. I think particularly looking at both your experience in the emerging markets, what do you see as like the sort of tipping point to having the sort of bankless be banked, and how do you see what both you guys are doing, whether it's Midnight and Cardano or the UN, sort of help move that forward?
Well, one of the issues was, so I talked about for many, many years that the biggest beneficiaries of this change would be Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. because of the sort of financial inclusion, banking, providing financial services to the unbanked. And when President Bukele implemented the Bitcoin law, I led the first delegation to enter the country post-COVID with 35 CEOs and basically organizations that were the service providers that would assist in the implementation, which they wanted to do within 90 days. And we're down there, and I'm sitting there going to have to make all these sort of presentations, and I'm looking at the cost of being able to send a small sum of money to someone in Africa and the fees, and that after all these years, we still didn't have a fast, cheap mechanism to do that. I'll give a quick shout out to Libre.org, Ben Sigmund and Fred Kruger, both longtime partners of mine. We named it because we were in El Salvador, Libre. I bought the domain, gave it to them. But if you want to really make these things accessible, we have to have low fees. If you want to, the unbanked typically are not those of us in the room that got debanked. They're people that have never been banked. And by nature, it normally means low income. And to really impact the lives and provide utility to those people, you have to have something that's easy to use, it's fast, and very low in fees, if not feeless. Otherwise, it doesn't actually solve that problem. That's the fundamental issue that Libre and some others have been working on. The good news is, with layer 2s and the architecture of systems, we're getting around, high gas fees and, the big transaction fees. We're now getting past those, meaning the products and services that people are building should be able to solve that problem. But it took a long time. The reality is, this was an opportunity for those that already had access to disposable income, or you were a developer. And it wasn't really a system that yet was empowering, the big chunk of society that had been deprived of opportunity and call it left out of the financial system. But we're there, we're on the cusp. We can now deliver, the products and services that can really empower, people that, back to food, shelter, your basic necessities, to have the luxury of the pursuit of happiness. There are basic things that you need to be given an opportunity in life, and financial services is one of them.
So the first thing is don't listen to the media. That goes without saying. And Brock is absolutely right. It's a multidimensional problem where part of it is UX and cost of operation. And in the early days, the user experience was not there, and it was tremendously expensive and time-consuming to send a transaction, and also the meta around the transaction of the on and off ramps were just simply not there. So I could send you something, but what the hell is Bitcoin going to do for you in the middle of Namibia when there's no exchange or something like that? It doesn't really do much for you. It's just this weird thing. So the good news is that we're now starting to see organic liquidity form and a lot of great on and off ramps and good points of exchange. The second thing is, and we started a company called RealFi in Kenya to test this out. So I put a small amount, I put $5 million in, and we deployed loans to about 70,000 people, mostly women, throughout Uganda and Kenya. And we were able to get a great interest rate, and our non-performing loan rate went from 40% to 2%. And we're, over time, going to grow this to be a completely decentralized market with decentralized credit and identity, and also a decentralized marketplace for that you can tokenize, use stable coins. You can run on multiple rails throughout the system. So we've made a lot of strategic investments, like in Moneta and others, to help facilitate this. For the on and off ramps, I'd like to see an open source ATM program. One of these days we'll do an X Prize, and if somebody can build me an ATM with a certain list of features, I'll give them $1 million or something like that. That's under $300 to make, because then the cost of banking an entire country is like $5-6 million worth of ATMs for a mid-sized country, which is dirt fucking cheap if you want to bank 40 million people or 80 million people. So each generation cryptocurrency, the cost of banking is going down. The identity primitives are there, and the killer app to bank people, especially places like Africa, will be fast-moving consumer goods and credit, especially credit in the 30 to 90 day window, these flash loans that exist. This is how most people live and die, is how most people be able to buy their goods. And if you can create a circle there that's non-predatory, that's competitive, where the interest rates fall, people won't care about crypto. They'll do it because this is the dominant way of lending. And then coincidentally, it starts banking all these people because they're banked in crypto. They're not banked in the legacy world. And they all of a sudden own their own wallet, they own their own identity, and they have access to the global markets. The next step is then adding more sophisticated finance on top, because then that allows them to get micro IPOs, it allows them to tokenize their business, it allows them to participate in more complex financial transactions. So you have to kind of walk the stack. Do you have the right payment protocols? Do you have the right identity protocols? Do you have the right credit protocols? Do you have the right incentive structure? Do you have the right cash in and cash out ramps? And do you have connectivity? One of the reasons why one of the flagship ventures that we've always been working with is World Mobile and the Cardano ecosystem is that they're creating a decentralized internet service provider. Connect the unconnected. We want to bank the unbanked, but what if the unbanked don't have phones or don't have internet? How do you connect them? You need to have a decentralized ISP. So the good news is we've gone from 15 years where crazy people barking at people on the side of the street, Bitcoin's under $1 and we have to buy our own coffee, to like, people take us seriously and we're probably going to do it, and we're probably going to do it within 5-10 years, which is extraordinary because the banking system had 100 years to do this. And not only did they not do it, they fucked everybody. So fuck them, we're just going to do it ourselves.
I love the point in terms of the incentive to banking the unbanked being the credit. That's the incentive and the need, because we can do it better, faster, cheaper, and it's one of those things we're thinking about for a moment when you talk about impacting the lives, changing the lives of over 1 billion people for the better. You know, that's what we're doing here. And you know, if it doesn't make you feel good and you're not like proud of this, it's worth, you know, spending a little bit of time just thinking about the world we can create.
Anyone else?
I wanted to mention that, you know, you go to a lot of conferences and you hear a lot of long talks about this and that, but this is the meat and potatoes of you know, making change. And you can have a lot of experience, you can have a lot of intelligence. Both of you have experience and intelligence, but to be hands-on and to be, you know, speaking about all those little protocols, those little pieces. A lot of people, you know, I want to be over here and just be the concept guy. I want to be over here and just do this piece over here. But to put those pieces together, I want to congratulate you and I'm just happy myself that I can come somewhere and get some good information and get excited and move forward, because this is all about progress. And I wanted to ask you, in that vein, what are your thoughts, or what have you done with auditing Midnight, and what are your plans on auditing in regards to your code and what you're doing economically?
Well, I mean, our problem with auditing is we overdo it at input-output. You know, we're experts in formal methods and we're experts in high-assurance software development. So we follow very similar standards to people like NASA or, you know, people like the Software Engineering Institute. And unfortunately, we kind of get a reputation for being too slow. You know, it's only been 6 years to build Midnight. I mean, that's pretty fast, right? You know. So it's always a game of the bounds of what you're worried about from both a cybersecurity, a usability viewpoint, and also what third-party interoperability is required for these types of things. So it's not just the core protocol, it's the wallets that run in the protocol, it's the devices that connect to it, how they're installed, how they're procured, the software supply chain. And there's hundreds of standards and other such things, and we have a combination of the right languages, so you need a high assurance language like Rust or Haskell to do these things, the right testing frameworks, like we use a lot of property-based testing and simulations, test-driven development as well. Specification writing is extremely important as well, because you actually have to know architecturally if it's correct and how those components come together, and we're masters of writing those. In fact, we not only write them, we write our own specification languages. Like, we actually have core developers who work on Agda, and we were the first to allow code extraction Agda to Haskell, so we can do by simulation testing where and when that makes sense, alongside model checking. And that's great for software. But then there's also, if the software is perfect, but the protocol is poorly designed, it doesn't do what you want it to do. So you have to write academic papers, and part of those academic papers there you go through peer review. So we write like the Ouroboros protocol, that's the proof of stake protocol for Cardano. It is among the most cited academic papers in all of cryptocurrency. We have more than 2,000 citations just on that paper, the Ouroboros Classic paper, and GKL has about the same. We have 10,000 citations across everything. We work with 168 scientists, and we've written 240 papers. So there's that component as well, and the peer review tells you if the protocol makes sense. But neither of these solve your economic problem. You can have a perfect protocol, you can have perfect code, and you can fail because your incentives are wrong. So the single most important thing is, did you get the tokenomics right? Did you get the incentives to participate right? And when you get it right, you get a Satoshi with Bitcoin, where it goes from a single miner in a small network to this colossal behemoth with 550 million holders and a cult-like following around it. And when you get it wrong, you're NXT. Brock probably remembers NXT, but I remember them when I was CEO of Ethereum. They were the ones that scared me, because they went from fucking nothing to like this giant movement that was sponsoring every conference. They had smart contracts before us. It was called automated transactions. They had a DEX. They had user-issued assets. They had this Java-based code base. They were the first to proof of stake. They were moving rapidly, but they got their distribution wrong. They fucked up their tokenomics. And it shattered the ecosystem, and they became Crypty and Lisk and Scorex and all these other projects. Wave was another. And so, thank God for that for us. But it's a great case study and lesson that when you get your tokenomics wrong, the thing collapses. So you also have to audit that. You have to think, okay, well, game theoretically, does it make sense? And then also, are there any models for understanding behavior for these types of things? The answer is no. Because classical economics, it's all about like utility functions and rational behavior and equilibria. I have no idea what the hell the equilibria are in cryptocurrency. It's like a living monument to black swan events and non-equilibria behavior. And furthermore, what is a rational actor in crypto when we have dog with hat and these other things? The fuck does that mean? I don't know, so I can't possibly tell you what that, and what utility are we maximizing inside crypto? Is it just value appreciation? Well, maybe, maybe not, but there's a lot of behaviors that would be contraindications to that. So classical economic models don't work at all in the cryptocurrency analysis. So one of the model sets that makes sense are probably complex adaptive systems. The problem is that those are typically not applied in general to economics. And it's only recently with like the work of Dr. Farmer and others to actually even apply those to economics. And nobody's taken the time to build a CAS model, an agent-based model for cryptocurrency. So that's one of the things that we're working on right now, but it's early days there. So there's no concise answer to the audit question. Because it's also governance too, and we haven't even gotten to that. I'd be here for 20 minutes to talk to you about the legendary fights people have with foundations, and we've all seen it. It's the dirty secret. If you build a cryptocurrency, you hate your foundation. At some point, I don't care who you are, you know who you are, man. Governance is so fucking hard, and so how do you get the stuff there? And those are just 4 areas. There's probably more than a dozen other areas. I've been in it for 15 years, and I haven't been sued, and I'm not dead, so I'm pretty good at this. But, outside of telling you that, it would take you 2 hours to convince you. Anything on your side?
Well, I think I'm going to touch on a couple of other points. We talked about rational behavior. I think it's worth talking a moment just, thematically things that are going on, like maybe meme coins. I think memes, as we talk about what is the value and where is the rationale, it's interesting because you have people that have come into wealth in many cases that never had wealth before, right? So you have a lot of courage, people that are willing to do things with money that you wouldn't otherwise have. And that's why what's so powerful about this collective movement is this is the biggest wealth transfer there's ever been into hands that have otherwise not had it, or youth that maybe hadn't had it, and it's in large scale, and that's where we're seeing impact. And I think the impact that we've seen politically, well, first of all, it's also worth noting, because I didn't mention it, Donald Trump launched a meme coin 3 days before he was sworn in as president of the United States of America with no KYC. just as another point of permission, and guidance has come in that meme coins are not securities. Meaning, if you, what do they say? He who controls the memes controls the universe. The memes must flow. The revolution won't be televised. It will be memed. And if you can't beat them, meme them. And so it's an interesting thing in terms of how we, in pop culture, like memetics, how culture is formed. The mimetic language, I mean, it was our tweets, it was our single image memes, and now they're a way of basically betting on memes, saying, does this meme have, in a pumped up fund, they're just pumping out, and what memes break through as a way to just have fun, or to support ideas and movements you believe in, or as a way of protesting. It's kind of, in some ways, almost replacing betting markets and prediction markets. It's an interesting thing. Certainly, if you're not playing around in it and you choose to, only play with money you're willing to lose. I think it's also, we were talking about NFTs at lunch today. I think the NFT market would be back right now if the meme market hadn't basically sucked all the oxygen out. And the NFT market had regulatory sort of scares, which is, I think, what really popularized the meme markets. But I think NFTs are continue to be very real in that it's just a way of tracking title and chain of custody, and it's not just for art, it's all these things. But I think that market, I think, comes back at some point here because it's fundamentally sound, and it unlocks value for all digital art. But like most crypto markets, it becomes a token go up game, and it becomes a game where markets become irrational, back to the rationale. And anytime the markets become overly irrational, the crash, leaves everyone burned and wounded, and it takes a while to heal before we go, oh, well, yeah, fundamentally this is a sound idea. It's real, and it just became, got out of control, kind of like the internet in 99, 2000. This is not new here. But I'm excited about some of these other technologies that, are present and have been around, and that infrastructure is there. I mean, I kind of want to go and start going through what are all the NFTs that have historic significance, real art, because it's an interesting sort of buying opportunity. I think that stuff does come back, obviously, minus all the shit, of which most of it was.
I remember I used to live in Japan, and I was in Osaka, and I had this really cheap Airbnb, so I'd take the Mitasuji line down to like the boundaries of town. And one of the most fun things to do was like Saturday morning to take the Mitasuji line, the first train down, because you'd see all these people that just get totally destroyed at the bars, and they'd be waiting to go on. And you'd always have this person that's like, I'm never drink again, never again. And you see him next week. And you're like, bro, I thought you were never going to drink again. But that's NFTs and meme coins. People just get absolutely destroyed. They're like, never again, man. But then they buy Brock with hat. And there you go. You guys know you're going to create it. It's not a question of if it's going to exist, it's what networks and how much. But just people like these things. They enjoy these things. And absolutely right about moderation and consumption. You got to drink in moderation. You smoke in moderation. I smoke cigars, and so it's okay. And people want to be free. Capital wants to be free, and people want to express themselves. And in some cases, you do that with how you dress. Some cases, you do that with the clubs and organizations you join. In some cases, you do that with membership in organization societies. It could be meme coins. It could be NFTs. And I think it's a very legitimate thing. And Donald Trump coin is kind of like a prediction market on the political influence and power of Trump. If you think he's powerful, the token price goes up. If you think he's weakening, the token price goes down. It's actually the first political tracking coin we have of a world leader. And it's a much more efficient way of wealth transfer, I'd say, than the way Nancy Pelosi does it or any of these other people. So I'd rather have that. Let's be honest with you there, because that's not connected to anything. So you never know, and it's a new era, and what's cool is that when you create economic agency behind something, you get a completely different lens or dimension to take a look at that. We don't like to admit this, but everything, whether it be the truth or it be life or whatever, there's usually an economic component, which is why NASA puts a price tag on every astronaut. Every business does this in a certain way. And meme coins are no different, NFTs are no different. The only difference is we can now have one global market that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across everybody, where we all get to participate and we get to see the value of the memes. Good question, though. All right, next question.
So I'm here from Oda AI. Excited to be working with you. You mentioned stablecoins. So what would a better stablecoin design look like that leverages ZK proofs and perhaps specifically Midnight Network?
So it's interesting because you actually have some OGs here. So Brock was one of the founders of Tether, and I was one of the founders of Bitcoin, which was the first algorithmic stablecoin. We were way ahead of our time.
Well, but it was BitUSD
Yep.
that, why I ended up building Tether.
Yeah, and also created MakerDAO, came out of BitUSD as well. And so, and then there was Steam. Remember Steam to USD and all. I love that. You write a little blog post, you get $3,000. It's like, all right, take it to Polynex. So stable coins, really, what you look for there is first off, what is your root of trust? Is it a central issuing authority? Is it an algorithm? Is it a basket on chain? That's the number one thing. And then the first job of a stablecoin issuer is to anchor and secure that root of trust in the best possible way. Now, one of the flaws of BitShares was that we were over-collateralized, and we did this because every time we wrote a mathematical model that was partially collateralized, there was a bank run when you had too much volatility, which is what Luna ran into. So BitShares avoided Luna, but it was too economically inefficient to dominate and become the big thing. And also, we didn't have a DeFi revolution then. Had BitShares launched a year or two later, we may have actually won. So that's one dimension, is the root of trust and what secures it. Is it regulation? Is it custodial standards and audit and oversight, or whatever the heck it is? The second thing is that where does the stablecoin get minting and liquidity? What are the exchange mechanics for both your primary issuance and your secondary issuance, and how does that transform? The third thing is, what are the competitive differentiators? Because the problem with stablecoins is they all kind of look alike. Okay, a dollar is a dollar, all things being equal. So can I pay a yield? And some people are exploring creating a stablecoin where you create a buy token, and you have one coin representing the underlying asset and one coin representing the yield on the T-bills, and you get both of them at the same time when you mint. So you have one that's a security, one that's not, or something security-like, and the other one's not. That's interesting. The other side of it is perhaps differentiation on privacy, which I think is a big one. We wrote a paper called Parscoin where we discussed how to do a private stablecoin, because I'm not really comfortable with every transaction forever being tracked. Doesn't make any sense there. So that's another big question of, can you create a stablecoin with reasonable level of privacy that a regulator is happy with, but people are also happy with, and it preserves your human rights. But those are basic things inside the stack, and every single one of them carries a lot of challenges, especially as you go into the secondary market and people start doing interesting things with it. But if you get it right, I mean, Tether is the 6th or 7th largest holder of security of treasury bills in the world.
I think we're like 15.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tether has $85 billion of U.S. treasuries. I mean, it's on its way to doing, it's upwards of $100 trillion a year in transactional volume. It's rather extraordinary in terms of trade finance. It's changing the way that trade in the world is conducted because of that 24/7, 365 way in which the world operates. If you can have systems that settle at all times versus something that's only open from 9 to 5, closes on holidays, markets want this, and it's clearly, having a massive impact beyond just the work that we've done. It's also back to what's bringing people on board, credit, to bring the unbanked in. A big part of what's bringing industry in is that added benefit of a more efficient market that moves money faster, lower fees being transacted as you do foreign exchange issues. It's a huge use case, and it's extraordinary how big it's gotten. It's worth talking 1 second about why it's so big. Markets. Liquidity begets liquidity. And so people want the biggest, most liquid thing that has the greatest distribution, the greatest endpoints, right? And so that's what, Tether has, which is why it dominates the market. But markets always want a number two player, as a way of mitigating risk, where your number two player is usually going to have, 30 or 20% of the market share. And then there's always going to be the third tier, which is everything else. You're not likely going to see a bunch of large stable coins. And we're going through another market entry of a bunch of people thinking you can just get that, but implementing all of that distribution is not easy. It takes time, and building that trust, which takes time. So the one vulnerability or opportunity that exists, well, there's more than one, is back to the eventual algorithmic solution, which is eliminating one risk factor, which is the federation of effectively, banks that are holding those funds. I think now as the regulatory markets change, I think people are going to be less concerned about that risk factor, which would have been a bigger concern. What if they try to shut Tether down and, then how long does it take to get your money out? I think that risk is mostly mitigated, but there's still, I think, some advantages to an algorithmic solution that, could exist. But the bigger opportunity is ultimately in offering yield, right? The biggest thing, if you were going to be competing in the stablecoin market, is offering the yield. I mean, Tether made $14 billion last year, and how do you ultimately get that into your users? But even if you have a great solution, this stuff is very slow going. To build the amount of trust, to reach, this sort of use case, you can continue to innovate. There's always opportunities to try and chip away. But I don't think those markets are going to change in a meaningful way, but it is in yield and DeFi. Though you can get yield on your Tether, and the DeFi, one other point we're talking about is, wow, what have we done in 15 years? We've gone through everything the world's financial system has gone through in the last 150. Every time we've had one of these black swan events, that was good for us, right? This has been figuring out where all of our flaws were and making sure that we built a resilient system that's been battle tested. We've gone through essentially all the learnings of the financial system, which was something we had to do. These were almost inevitable things. No one is going to plan for everything. And also, a lot of people are going to launch things not having been audited fully, taking risks, because we're also experimenting. We're pushing the boundaries, and every now and then someone is going to go too far, and the floor is going to fall out from under them. So it's all good stuff. I mean, as long as everybody's hopefully learned their lessons from each of these experiences, DeFi looks pretty solid at this point, and the yields, from a fixed income perspective, are very real. It's like, where do you put your money at this point? Certainly if you're looking to lend. And I think the lending markets, the DeFi markets that are emerging here we've been through our first, set of bad experiences, and we've learned what not to do. We've learned what counterparty risks are, and we've learned how to manage through those things, that even if there is a failure in the system, certainly for those that are experienced, it might cost you a year of your yields. You may lose whatever it is that you lost that year, but you shouldn't be losing your principal. And you shouldn't be losing your shirt in the process. So, that's where the stable market is. And wow, again, back to a big part of why I think that we have this position with Trump. I'm seeing how, as BRICS are forming and challenges on the U.S. dollar, like over 90% of this future financial system settles in dollars, right? It buys more U.S. treasuries than any company in the world. It's, at the governmental level, and we have the ability to really enable and bring people on. And one other thing that was worth noting, and Trump's brilliance here, if you study Democrats, independents, and Republicans, like, how does this industry fall? It's an even split. But a lot of us are single issue voters, meaning we care more about the future than most of the policy discussions being had. if you don't, as a nation, bet on the future, that's the thing that I think most of us are concerned about, is being left behind, right? And Trump brilliantly, recognized that we are a material voter bloc and we're single issue voters. Every person in this last election that ran on a crypto platform won. This is not just an American issue. This is a global issue for anyone in politics. We are a big block of voters. We care deeply about the future and innovation. And if you're against the future, if you're against innovation, we're probably going to vote against you, even if we're aligned on many other levels. And we have a couple $1 trillion, so we're not just voters, in the ballot. With ballots, we're also voters with our wallets at this point. We really showed up, and so we've made it. Again, it's still I know these things as they're happening, and it's just such a radically different world. It's like, it's such a, like, to feel validated by the global system of governance, and recognized for the value that we're bringing to the world, to sleep well, to not that I was ever afraid, because we're like the courageous ones, or we wouldn't be pioneering the future. But it doesn't mean it wasn't without knowing the risks. I spent 6 months unable to sleep before I was going to publicly start building and putting my name on this industry, going, this could cost me my life, this could cost me my liberty, and I only have the best of intentions for us in our future. But that is the risk, having gotten to this business, certainly for those of us that were around in the early days. I eventually said, I'd been doing this in games for 10 years. I'm like, at some point, it's like, this is my destiny. I haven't had all this training leading up to this point to not do it. So, pray and go. But here we are. We're on the other side. Those risks are gone. Those risks are gone. We're like, it's like freedom. Like, let freedom reign. Like, we are free. It's and free to build. It's like such a thing that I'm not sure everybody has fully grokked yet.
Yeah. So first off, guys, I just want to point this out. Brock, as a side quest, built a company that makes as much money as Goldman Sachs. When you look at Tether, that's pretty. As a side quest, that's pretty impressive. I mean, Tether is it's a small operation, too. It's only a few hundred people. I mean, Goldman's like, 30,000 people or some shit? It's crazy.
The most profitable company per employee in the history of the world.
In the history of the world. And that's not a small feat. And it was a company that was very needed, and it took a lot of courage, because every year everybody said, is this going to be the year that those Tether guys go to jail? And it was just a conversation. The press would literally run these headlines, and every single time there was any news about some DA doing something somewhere, all the big names like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, everything, they'd call up and say, all right, we want to be the first to have the scoop. Who's going to jail? What's going to happen? And it ages you. A lot of people don't believe I'm 37 years old. They look at me, they're like, there's no way. I mean, look at that fat and look at that hair that's missing and these things and the wrinkles on the eyes. I used to be young. I'm old now. I feel so old. It's like the president, 1 year's every 4 years. Well, crypto, like 1 year's every 8 years, You start becoming meme with that guy with the coffee. And so it's tough being in the cryptocurrency space. And the thing is like we're not dealing with small fish. It's not like you're running a Burger King and there's a McDonald's across the street and that guy running that McDonald's really hates you. You are literally dealing with the torrents of the movement of the lifeblood of the world, the money of the world, how money's made, where money goes, who are the winners, who are the losers. This is the lubricant that kind of starts wars. This is the kind of stuff why we invade Libya or invade Iraq or these other things. This is not small potatoes. And
people get killed,
people
not
get
just
killed.
jailed.
Okay, don't believe me. There's something that happened in 1963. Look it up. So there's stuff that occurs here, and cryptocurrency industry somehow, some way, by hook or crook, we found a way to survive long enough to become inevitable, and there is an inevitability that we're going to win as an industry. And the number one point is to keep the faith and keep the principles and keep the decentralization. We created something called the Edinburgh Decentralization Index. I'd love for you guys to take a look at it, because I just wanted to measure what is decentralization. And it's one of many core principles that people have to preserve and protect and keep sacred, because it's very easy at this stage of the movement for it to get co-opted and transformed into something we never intended. We're this close to the revolution being permanent and this close to us actually winning. So it's made by young people. When I remember the first time I met Brock was in Blockchain Miami, that Bitcoin Miami, that was Mo Levin's conference, January of 2014. I saw you walking down in a suit with a bunch of people, and we were the young kids telling you about Ethereum. And he was quite interested, and I was like, finally, somebody took us seriously. It's like, I saw him in the Mighty Ducks. All right, yeah. This is great. You know, Sinbad is awesome in the first kid. All right, anyway. So I remember that. That was cool.
I'm starring in movies again. I just did one with now Ambassador John Voight. It'll come out in 2 months.
No shit.
Yeah.
What's it called?
That one's called The Last Gunfight. Filmed it last summer. It's like a Ocean 11 meets John Wick. The next one I'm doing with John Voight is called The Factory, a.k.a. The Company.
Wow, okay.
And so John and I are running the factory.
And it was just cool, you know. I was a little guy, he's a big guy, and we all grew up in the industry. And another person I met right around the same time was Gabe Abed. And he literally ran into me right after Brock ran into me, and Gabe was running this little thing called the Koblitz Group. He's now the ambassador at large for Barbados, and he opened the Barbadian embassy in Abu Dhabi. And he's one of the most prominent cryptocurrency entrepreneurs in the middle.
He's also chairman of Binance now.
He's chairman of Binance, yeah. And Binance was quite small. I remember the old days with CZ. They were very fun days.
I mean, I gave CZ his first job in crypto.
No shit.
When you talked about ATMs, because there's a list of 100+ things that we've done that are, you know, not normally going to be part of any of these conversations. But what happened is the first Bitcoin ATM was launched in Vancouver called a RoboCoin.
I remember that, yeah.
It had a line around the block. I was working with Matt Rozak, and I said, Matt, let's go figure this one out. I called Jordan Kelly, the CEO, and I said, hey, I'm Mr. Asia. I want the exclusive distribution rights for all of the Asian markets, and CZ ran that. Now, RoboCoin couldn't deliver. CZ did the most incredible job of lining up market distribution, but they never shipped us the products in a timely manner. But that was, the first Bitcoin ATM.
I remember that. Did you guys ever work with Haseeb, the Pakistani guy?
Yeah, I was an investor in BitAccess, right?
Oh, yeah,
that was his company,
Because
BitAccess.
he was Toronto side.
And then I also started with Scott Walker of DNA. We started a company called Zenbox. We were the biggest distributor of Bitcoin ATMs in the United States. And Brinks and Guarda, the companies that deliver money for ATMs, wouldn't work with us.
Right.
So we were using FedEx with cash. And having ATMs in the shopping malls, and we were national. Oh, it was hell. You know, having to fix these machines that people they weren't built great and breaking down. And I'm trying to figure out how to automate the balancing of money, meaning when the ATM has more money in it, drop the fees all the way to zero, could even go negative, so that I can turn the customers effectively into so I don't have to move money between machines. I can do it in pricing. And then because if you've been in this business, you know what a SAR report is, suspicious activity. So one day I want to just go see all the SAR reports, and I want to go through and just show me pictures of all the customers. Once I did that next review of it, I went to Scott. I said, Scott, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You and I are just going to give 100% of the equity to the team because you and I can't afford to be in this business. It just isn't worth it. There's too many risks in this one, but we built out the whole original ATM infrastructure. I mean, the stories are endless. If you've been building and side questing always.
Right. Oh my Lord, you remember local Bitcoins?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So I used to have this great mining rig. I had these AMD 5850s. It was 1.2 gigahashes. I was real proud of it. 4 graphics cards and the thing. And I'd make a few Bitcoin every week with that. And so every now and then when I needed some lunch money or something, I'd actually go on local Bitcoins and sell it. Guys, it was always like doing a drug deal. And I was like, no, this Bitcoin thing's legit, man. And then you use local Bitcoin, some guy in a leather coat, show me, you got the stuff, man. You got the stuff. He's like, give you some cash, and you transfer the things to him, and he's just looking around all shady and walks off. And I'm like,
You know, it was the Wild West, but the Wild West became California.
That's true.
And so, last point is I'll tell one story which I don't think I've ever said publicly. Going back to the Ethereum days, Scott and I put 500 Bitcoin into the Ethereum crowd sale, and back then you didn't have token infrastructure, so the Ethereum token was not tokens were not distributed until the network was launched a year later. Similar to building Tether on Bitcoin, I built a thing called EtherCoin. So I took 1 million ETH, put it on the Bitcoin blockchain, and then listed the EtherCoin on the exchanges. So it was the sole price discovery mechanism and sole market maker for Ethereum for a year. And I was anonymous.
Did that? You're the guy.
Smart contract. It's been so long, I feel safe telling that story. There's reasons I kept that one anonymous.
Oh, God.
but the Ethereum days. I also, another one that's normally not known, which is how EOS happened. And Scott, Michael Cow, and I, we had 10% of the batch 1 Avalons, the first ASIC.
Right.
But we also built, I think, the biggest mining operation in the United States, which was at the time 10 megawatts up in Wenatchee, up in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so Gavin Wood is a very, close friend and things. And so I fly to Amsterdam. I'm on my way to, because I taught at the Singularity University, their first class in India. And Gavin's about to have a child, not him, but his partner. And he's like, honey, I know the baby is due any minute, but Brock's coming to Europe, and he's only going to be here for a night, so I got to go. She's like, you're leaving? He's like, finally, I'll take the last flight of the night, and I'll take the first flight back. We'll just talk all night. You'll be sleeping. You won't even know I was gone. So we get there, and Ethereum had just gone from $1 to $4. And Gavin's like, Brock, you could corner the market on all the, what at the time were the best AMD chips, which we did. Bought out 100% of all 3 wholesalers, Amazon, Newegg, and we cornered the market on all Ethereum mining, which, there's so many fun stories over the years. All of us, because there was only really probably 100 of us, really doing all the crazy stuff.
You created so many tax issues for people because when the ICO happened, we argued that
we were Mastercoin. We were the first ICO.
Oh, I remember. That's J.R. Willett. It was
J.R. Willett's creation.
He stored the Bitcoin on his mom's computer in his basement. It was $500,000 worth of Bitcoin, which is worth a lot nowadays because of the $100 Bitcoin that he raised it at. But
it was about $600,000 at the time.
It was $600,000, yeah. I remember it was Dave Johnson and the rest of the guys. You were in Bid Angels, right?
I wasn't Bid Angels, but so I was Scott Walker, John Yantis, and we were the biggest investor in the token sale.
Oh, okay.
And so then John and I went on the board of the foundation.
So here's the biggest issue that he caused for us. Now I know it was you. You're the guy. So the valuation of Ether was sitting around the ICO price. So it was like $18 million raised, right? So then you do the founder distributions for various people with Ether, and they would argue that because there's no market for it, that the price was still the same at that $18 million valuation. So you have a very low tax basis. But if you create a synthetic market, the IRS can argue, no, it's actually the price of this synthetic market over here, which is like 100 times more than the fucking ICO. Which creates a huge tax consequence when you do a distribution, which is why we don't like synthetic marketplaces for me. Anyway, it all got sorted out.
I had to do it. It was just kind of too obvious, and we were some of the only people that built layer 2 stuff at the time. So I think this is a good place to wrap. I'd like to, just give thanks to Charles Hoskinson for all of his contributions to the industry, the world, academia. To everyone here at DNA for the incredible work. Sean Donnie, crushes this. We do this all the time. It's a lot of work doing this all over the world. But most importantly, to Satoshi, we would not have been able to do this if it were not for this decentralized architecture. We would not be standing here today. But as we are here, it's a toast to freedom, to liberty, to the permissions, to being here at the cusp. And as Charles warned, it's in these last moments, remember, stay true to your principles, right? As we live in a world that's uneditable, as we enter a world that's uneditable, this is a single source of truth. Your actions, your integrity is, going to be more important than ever. So don't lose it. And to all of us that are building, to all of those that have contributed, and to all of those that will join, to all of us changing the world, let's go.